Is Monday, March 30th, and it would be a B day if we were still in school, which of course we're not. This is the beginning of week 3 of school closures in New York State due to COVID-19. And with week 3, we've had some issues with distance learning. The biggest one being that with so many people, both across New York State and a lot of the country right now, trying to log into platforms at the same time, it's really not being able to keep up with the demand. I don't think the infrastructure, was really set up for this much traffic all at once. So we're coming across a lot of issues. Personally, I spent about 4 hours this morning trying to upload things, trying to set assignments to active, and I just could not get in. Every time I would attempt to do something on our platform that we're using, Schoology, it would crash. I would upload something, click save, and it would crash. I would try to respond to comments or questions from students, and it would crash. And it's frustrating. It's incredibly frustrating, but we have to persevere. We have to be patient. We as educators, if there's any other educators who stumble across these videos, we all want to create as rich of an experience as we can given the circumstances for our students. And you as students, I know that you want to get this work and to be able to get as much out of this as possible, especially as this goes farther. And in New York, we know we're out of school at least until April 15th. And, this is going to be our new reality for a little while. So we have to be aware that this is going to happen. We have to be patient. And sometimes that means that we have to give up and try again in a half hour and see if maybe there's a little less traffic on the network and if we can get through. Perseverance is the key here. That's the term we have to remember. The ability to not get frustrated and give up, to persevere, to keep going with something, to stick through with something to the end, regardless of how challenging or frustrating it is. And along with that, talking about the definition of a word, I want to talk about two terms that are important to understand when we're talking about vocabulary and we're talking about reading comprehension. And those two terms are connotation and denotation. And connotation and denotation refer to meanings of words. And they both refer to how a word is perceived or defined. So we'll start with the easiest one, which is denotation. The denotation of a word is the dictionary definition. And that's easy to remember if you think of denotation starts with a D and dictionary starts with a D. So the denotation of a word is just straight up dictionary definition. So let's say, for example, the word haunt, right? Haunt in the dictionary has several meanings, right? The first is the one we most likely associate with, which is, ghosts haunting a place. But a haunt can also refer to a place that's frequented by people, right? That was one of my old haunts. That's the dictionary definition of the word. That's the denotation of the word. But words also have a connotation, right? Connotation starts with a C, and an easy way we can think about that or remember it is to think of connections, right? So the connotation of a word are the connections we associate with it beyond the dictionary definition. So think of that as the extra feelings and associations we make with a word. So haunt, again, literally means a place frequented by someone. But the connotation of that word, oftentimes because of that connection with ghosts, is something negative. So when we hear the word haunt, our connotation has these associations of scary places or ghosts. So that connection, that connotation is often negative. And that's important, right? Because when words are used in certain settings, people can use connotation and denotation in a very specific way to evoke certain feelings or emotions from readers, or if it's a speech, from listeners. And it's important to understand that because, and a lot of times it's done very deliberately, all right? So here's a classic example, a used car, right? The word used has a connotation that's very different from its denotation. The denotation, the dictionary definition, is literally something that someone else has previously used before. So a car that is used is something that has been driven by someone else prior to you purchasing it, right? But the connotation of the word used is very negative. When people think of something used, they imagine something that hasn't been treated very well, something that doesn't have the same value. That's why nowadays you don't really hear advertisements for used cars. Instead, what you hear are pre-owned car ads. And pre-owned has a very different connotation than used. Denotation-wise, they mean the exact same thing. But connotation for pre-owned, it doesn't have that same connotation as used. And that's why car dealerships switched to pre-owned. It got rid of that negative connotation of the word used. Antique and old, right, essentially have very similar denotations. But if you label something as old, people will think connotation-wise, it doesn't have any value. But if you list the same thing as an antique, then all of a sudden that connotation implies something of value. Therefore, people will treat it very differently. And you have to be very careful with that, right? It's the same thing when you're referring to students as a bunch of kids versus a bunch of young adults, right? The word kid can sometimes have a condescending or demeaning connotation, right? Whereas young adult sounds much better. The connotation of that has a much more positive feel to it. And that's important, right? Words matter. So think about that when you're reading particularly nonfiction sources, right? If you're reading something in the news, think about the words that are used and try to analyze the denotation, figure out what the words actually mean, and that would require the usage of a dictionary, whether that is a physical dictionary or a digital online dictionary. And then think about the connotation of those words. Look them up and see what's going on with the connotation. And think about whether or not they're being used on purpose, because that's an important thing to analyze, particularly as you get older, right? One of the things that is new to younger generations is the constant barrage of information. Nowadays, more so than ever, young people have access to information in such an enormous way, in such a unbelievable way, that we oftentimes don't think about the fact that they're not really given too many tools to parse or go through that information. And it's really important to develop critical thinking skills. And understanding connotation and denotation goes hand in hand with developing those critical thinking skills. So when you're reading things online, think about the words that are chosen. Think about the connotation of those words and what effect it has, the impact of it, right? Because that plays a big part. And there's a lot of words chosen for very hurtful reasons, right? The way we address certain people, the connotation of those words are often chosen on purpose by people, and we have to be careful about that. Just like when we talk to others, we should be aware of the connotation of the words we're using in reference to them, right? So keep that in mind, particularly now when, because of social distancing rules, a lot of our communication is being done through digital means. And when it's done through digital means, we lack a lot of the body language cues that can help us portray a little bit more meaning. So we have to be even more aware of the connotation and denotation of our words. And I think that's it for today. I hope everyone is doing well, and I hope we can get past the frustrations that are associated with the increased traffic of everyone trying to do distance learning essentially at the same time. Till next time,